There comes a day when we wake up and something inside us feels quietly misaligned, not in the dramatic way movies show it, not as a breakdown or a collapse, but as a subtle distance between the life we are living and the life that feels like it should have been ours. And we notice it in small moments, like standing in front of the mirror in the morning, looking into our own eyes and realizing that the person staring back feels strangely familiar yet slightly distant, as if we are watching a character we have been playing for years rather than meeting a self that feels fully alive. And somewhere in the chest there is a faint tension, a quiet whisper that says, "This looks like my life, but it doesn't really feel like me." And we usually push that whisper away because we have things to do, responsibilities, messages to answer, people who expect us to show up in a certain way. So we keep moving, we function, we perform. We go through the motions of a life that looks acceptable from the outside, but if we are honest, there is a sense that we are slowly drifting away from ourselves. This is what we are exploring together now, the quiet, almost invisible way in which we gradually stop living our own life and begin to live a life built out of expectations, fear, and adaptation, a life that is stable, respectable, maybe even admirable, but not truly ours. We don't do this because we are weak. We do it because from the very beginning we are trained to survive by adjusting who we are. Our families, often with good intentions, start shaping us early. We hear "be good," "don't make a scene," "don't cry," "don't talk back," "don't be too loud," "don't be too sensitive." And we learn that certain emotions and impulses make adults uncomfortable, while others make them proud. And because as children we need safety and love more than we need authenticity, we start to choose the version of ourselves that keeps the environment calm. School reinforces the pattern. Sit still, raise your hand, don't question too much, learn what we tell you is important, pass the test, move to the next level, and somewhere along the line, curiosity is quietly replaced with compliance. Culture then presents us with a pre-packaged story of what a proper life should look like. The right path, the right timing, the right milestones, the right image, the right boxes checked at the right age. We don't stand outside of these systems, we grow up inside them, so they don't feel like conditioning, they feel like reality. Carl Jung once wrote that the greatest burden on a child is the unlived life of the parents, and many of us carry exactly that, not just our own fears, but the unfinished stories and anxieties of those who raised us, absorbing their ideas about what is safe, respectable, and possible. Erich Fromm, in Escape from Freedom, described how we often flee from the anxiety of being truly free by choosing conformity, routine, and obedience, because following a script feels less terrifying than writing our own. So we learn to ask not "what do we truly want?" but "what will make us acceptable? What will make them proud? What will make us feel less afraid?" We don't consciously decide to abandon ourselves. We simply learn over time that some parts of us are rewarded and others are punished, and we adapt. We hide the wildness, the intensity, the grief, the anger, the inconvenient questions, the strange dreams, the sensitive parts that feel too much, and we replace them with something more manageable, more organized, more predictable. This is how the labyrinth begins, not with one big trauma, but with thousands of tiny moments where we quietly step away from ourselves to keep the world around us stable. The first layer of this labyrinth is what we can call the mask of functioning. The mask of functioning is the version of us that looks like everything is fine. It pays the bills, answers emails, shows up on time, maintains conversations, remembers birthdays, posts acceptable things, and moves through the world in a way that makes sense to others. People may even admire this version of us. We are responsible, reliable, strong, the one who holds it together, and sometimes we hold on to that image because it feels safer to be seen as stable than to be seen as lost. But beneath that surface, many of us feel a quiet hollowness, like we are ticking off tasks in a life that we don't fully inhabit. A typical day on the mask of functioning looks something like this. We wake up already a little tired, reach for the phone before we reach for ourselves, scroll through other people's lives, react to messages, drag our body out of bed, drink coffee not because we enjoy it but because we need to be on, go to work or open the laptop, Sit through meetings that feel disconnected from anything meaningful. Nod, agree, send polite emails. Handle responsibilities. Answer "I'm fine" when someone asks how we are. Come home drained. Numb ourselves with a screen or background noise. Tell ourselves we'll think about our real desires later. Then fall asleep with the feeling that the day somehow happened without us really being there. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. On paper, it might even look good. But inside, something feels absent. Our body knows this distance before our mind is willing to admit it. Under the mask of functioning, we might notice a tight chest that seems to always be slightly braced, a breath that never quite drops fully into the belly, a jaw that has forgotten what it's like to fully relax, tension in the shoulders that we call just stress, a heaviness in the limbs in the morning even when tests and doctors say we're physically fine. This is not about inventing illnesses. This is about admitting how it feels to carry a life that doesn't match our inner reality. Our nervous system has to work overtime to hold the contradiction between the way we live and the way we long to live. And that strain is what we register as a vague exhaustion that no amount of sleep or weekends seems to cure. If we have ever felt like our life looks stable but feels strangely hollow, we are not broken and we are not alone. We are simply becoming conscious of the first level of the labyrinth we've been walking in for years, and that consciousness is the beginning of something important, because once we notice the mask, part of us has already started to question it. The second layer of this labyrinth is what we can call the identity built for approval. If the mask of functioning is what other people see, the identity built for approval is what we slowly begin to believe about ourselves. It doesn't appear overnight. It forms the first time we realize that being natural has a price. Maybe as children we spoke honestly and someone said we were rude. We cried and were told we were dramatic or weak. We showed enthusiasm and were told we were too much, so we started to adjust. We didn't stop feeling what we felt. We just stopped showing it in full strength. We didn't stop wanting what we wanted. We just learned to want more quietly. Approval became a kind of emotional currency we used to buy safety. We noticed that when we were agreeable, pleasing, flexible, self-sacrificing, people relaxed around us. They smiled, they praised us, they called us mature or so kind. And our nervous system learned to associate being liked with being safe. Over time, safe and approved of became almost the same thing inside our body. So we began to construct a self that fit into what others could handle. We chose careers that were respectable rather than alive. We stayed in relationships where we were useful rather than truly seen. We said yes when everything in us wanted to say no, just to avoid conflict. We became the friend who listens to everyone else's pain but never really talks about our own. When someone asked how we were, we answered, "I'm fine," even on the days when that sentence felt like a tiny act of self-betrayal. After years of this, many of us started to confuse this adapted self with our real identity. We began to think, "I am just the responsible one, the rational one, the calm one, the one who can handle anything." But beneath that narrative there is often a quieter voice that says, "I am also exhausted." A typical day inside the identity built for approval might look like this. In the morning we already feel tired, but we still answer every message so no one thinks we are distant. We agree to a meeting we don't have energy for because we don't want to disappoint anyone. We offer help we don't have the capacity to give because we are the reliable one. We soften our truth in conversation so no one gets uncomfortable. We ignore the tightness in our stomach that appears when we say yes for the 10th time that week. We stay up late finishing something for someone else, telling ourselves it's not a big deal, and then we fall asleep scrolling, quietly resenting how drained we feel but also feeling guilty for that resentment. Our body registers this long before our mind is ready to name it. The throat that tightens when we want to disagree but choose to smile instead, the chest that feels heavy after we take on one more responsibility, the jaw that locks when we say it's okay, don't worry, even though part of us is very much not okay, the nervous, fluttering feeling in the belly when we imagine telling someone no and picture their disappointed face. None of this means we are sick. It means our body is tired of carrying a self that constantly bends. Carl Rogers, one of the great humanistic psychologists, spoke about how deeply we long to be accepted as we are, and how painful it is when acceptance seems to depend on being someone else. Many of us live in that exact tension. We want to be loved for who we are, but we keep presenting who we think we should be. We might notice patterns in our relationships that repeat. We attract people who take more than they give. We feel guilty when we rest. We panic a little when someone is upset with us. Even if logically we know we did nothing wrong, we feel responsible for other people's emotional weather. All of this points to one core wound. Somewhere along the way, we started to believe that we must earn our place in other people's lives by abandoning pieces of ourselves. And then something else quietly awakens, a subtle inner rebellion, a sense that we are lying to ourselves about what we really need. This is where the silent war within begins. The silent war within is the psychological conflict between the part of us that wants to stay safe, approved, and predictable, and the part that wants to be real, even if that reality changes the structure of our life. It shows up in the way we drag ourselves through routines that no longer make sense but feel too risky to question, in the way we say it's not that bad while a low, constant anger hums underneath, in the fantasies we have of leaving everything behind and starting over somewhere no one knows us, only to immediately tell ourselves that such thoughts are irresponsible or childish. Some days we are fully inside the role, performing it almost perfectly. We are efficient, calm, social, composed. Other days we feel like we are watching ourselves from a distance, thinking, "Who is this person living my days?" From the outside, nothing seems wrong. We might even be admired. But inside, there is a sense that every time we choose the familiar script over our deeper truth, something slightly dims. Our body keeps track of this dimming. The breath that becomes shallow after a day of saying what others want to hear. The shoulders that slump when we once again agree to something we didn't want. The restless sleep that follows days of swallowing our own truth. This is not weakness. This is data. It is the body saying, we cannot keep pretending this is fine. Erich Fromm warned that many of us secretly long to escape the responsibility of freedom by dissolving into roles, systems, or crowds that think for us, because being an individual with honest desires and limits is terrifying. The silent war within is the tension between that longing to dissolve and the equally deep longing to exist as ourselves. If we are still here listening, we are already on the side of the part that wants to exist. And if we have felt this conflict in our own chest, we are not alone. In fact, there is a quiet community of people around the world who are beginning to see through these masks and identities. If we want a place where we can keep exploring this without pretending, we can decide to stay in this conversation together. You can subscribe and put your comment to put our experience into words, not because it's trendy, but because naming this war out loud is one way we stop fighting it alone. The more we become aware of this conflict, the more one simple truth becomes unavoidable. Numbness is not peace. When we push our real feelings down long enough, our mind and body do something very intelligent. They go partially offline. We stop feeling our own excitement because it would make the gap between our real desires and our current life too obvious. We stop feeling our own grief because it would show us how much we have lost by performing. We stop feeling our own anger because it would ask us to change something. So we don't feel much at all. We call it being fine. But under fine, there is often a deep, dense layer of unprocessed life. And yet, even through the numbness, something in us watches. Something notices when we lie and doesn't fully believe us. That watcher, that quiet awareness that says this is not the whole story, is not our enemy. That is the part that leads us deeper into the labyrinth, not to get more lost, but to finally see the walls for what they are. The deepest layer of this labyrinth is what we might call the unlived life. The unlived life is not just a fantasy version of us that exists in daydreams. It is a very real psychological presence that follows us like a shadow. It is made of all the choices we never made, all the paths we abandoned before we took the first step, all the versions of ourselves we quietly exiled in order to keep things familiar. It looks like the career we felt drawn to but labeled unrealistic, the move to another city or country we postponed until it no longer felt possible, the creative work we kept planning to start when life became less busy, the conversations we rehearsed in our head but never had, the boundaries we never set because we were afraid of losing people, the relationships we stayed in even after our inner world had already left. Over time, the weight of the unlived life doesn't disappear. It migrates from the realm of ideas into the realm of feeling. We start to experience it as a background heaviness, a sense that our days are somehow flatter than they were meant to be, as if the color has been turned down halfway. On the surface, everything can look normal or even successful, but underneath we feel an odd disconnection, like we are slightly out of sync with our own timeline. We hear it in the sentences we quietly repeat to ourselves. I thought I'd feel more myself by now, or nothing is really wrong, but something feels off, or it's like my real life is happening elsewhere and I'm watching from a distance. That sensation is not stupidity or ingratitude. It is a signal. It is our psyche saying, we know there is more to us than this script. The brutal, beautiful truth is that the unlived life is not here to punish us. It is here to call us. But answering that call brings us to a crossroads at the very heart of our existence, the choice between comfort and truth. Comfort is what we already know how to do. It is the routine, the role, the familiar rhythm. It keeps other people relatively calm. It rarely demands that we confront our deeper fears. It lets us say, at least I know what to expect. Truth is something very different. Truth might ask us to admit that our current career numbs us more than it nourishes us. Truth might ask us to leave a relationship where we are tolerated but not truly met. Truth might ask us to set boundaries with people who are used to us having none. Truth might demand that we feel grief for the years we spent fitting in instead of inhabiting ourselves. Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote that we are condemned to be free, meaning that even when we pretend we have no choice, we are still choosing the known over the unknown, the lie over the discomfort of honesty. Emotional freedom is not the absence of chains. It is the moment we admit which chains we are holding onto because we are afraid to see who we are without them. Society, families, workplaces, and even friend groups often reward comfort. Systems are easier to manage when no one asks why we are doing what we are doing. Group harmony is more stable when no one names the truth in the room. That is why choosing truth can feel like betrayal, not only of others, but of the version of us that works so hard to keep everything supposedly under control. But there is a deeper betrayal that is far more devastating, the betrayal of spending the rest of our life pretending we don't know what we know. The labyrinth we are in is not built from stone. It is built from these very choices. Each corridor is a habit of saying yes while our whole body says no. Each dead end is a moment we silenced a truth that wouldn't have killed us to speak. Each twisting turn is a compromise we made to avoid discomfort in the short term, at the cost of our sense of aliveness in the long term. The hopeful part is that if our choices built this labyrinth, our choices can also become our path out. Not through reckless, dramatic explosions where we burn everything down in one day, but through something much more radical and much more sustainable, small acts of honesty with ourselves. Our body can be our guide here. When our chest tightens before we agree to something, when our stomach knots at the thought of another week lived exactly the same, when our jaw clenches as we say, "No, really, it's fine," those physical reactions are not meaningless. They are messages in a language older than any of our social roles. Instead of rushing past them, we can begin to pause. Not to diagnose, not to analyze endlessly, but to ask a single, simple question. What are we avoiding feeling or admitting right now? We don't have to fix anything in that moment. We don't have to tell anyone else. We don't have to change our life overnight. The first movement out of the labyrinth is to stop lying to ourselves about what is true. As we do this, the symbol of the labyrinth begins to shift. It is no longer just a prison we are stuck inside. It becomes a map of how we lost ourselves and how we can return. Every corridor we once walked in fear can become a path we now walk in awareness. Every room of our life where we once silenced our needs can become a place where those needs are finally heard. Every shadow we avoided can become a place where we meet a forgotten part of who we are. Jiddu Krishnamurti said that to be sanely adjusted to a profoundly sick society is no measure of health, and many of us are beginning to understand what that means from the inside. The fact that our life looks acceptable to others does not necessarily mean it is aligned with our soul. In a world that constantly invites us to perform, compete, numb out, and forget ourselves, choosing to see our inner reality clearly is already an act of rebellion. Most people will keep walking in their labyrinth with their eyes closed, calling the repetition of their patterns fate or personality. But if you are still here, still listening, something in you has already opened its eyes. We cannot go back to not knowing that we are off course. We can only decide what we will do with that knowledge. So here is our small labyrinth practice, not as a miracle solution, but as a doorway. In the next 24 hours, at some random moment, we will notice when our body suddenly tightens, a held breath, a clenched jaw, a sinking feeling in the belly, a heaviness in the chest that appears out of nowhere. In that moment, instead of reaching for distraction, we will give ourselves just a few seconds to stay. We will ask softly, what are we avoiding feeling or admitting right now? We will not force an answer. We will not demand action. We will not judge ourselves. We will simply refuse to lie. That is one honest step in the labyrinth. Step by step, truth by truth, sensation by sensation, we begin to reclaim the life that has always been trying to live through us. In a culture that worships speed, noise, and certainty, becoming a little slower, quieter, and more honest with ourselves is a deeply subversive act. The world does not need more people perfectly playing roles they secretly hate. It needs more people willing to live lives that are actually theirs, even if those lives look different from a script. Most will trade that possibility for the safety of the familiar. But if we are here together, we have already chosen something else. We are already walking, eyes open, through our own labyrinth. We do not escape it by force. We move through it with awareness, until one day we look around and realize that the walls are no longer closing in. They are simply the memory of how far we have come. And so the question that remains is simple and impossible at the same time. Will we continue living the life built to keep us comfortable, or will we slowly, courageously, begin to live the life that is unmistakably ours? Welcome to Labyrinth, Psychology of Shadows, where we do not run from the maze of our own making. We learn to read it, walk it, and, eventually, step out of it as the selves we were always meant to become.